Good afternoon, everybody. I think we'll maybe make a start. I'm just keeping an eye on the participant list, and I think we've stabilized a little bit where we'll make a start. A particular warm welcome to everyone this afternoon. This is a joint event between Ulster University Business School and Alumni Relations at Ulster University. We are delighted to see the uptake for this event. We knew it would be popular, but I think it has surpassed all expectation, and I know this is a very popular one for obvious reasons. This event aims to celebrate distinguished alumni and to provide thought leadership around some emerging issues in the current time. This particular event has been in planning for quite some time, and I think in some ways the timing is just right. There has never been a more important time for, I think, all of us to be exploring that leadership future of work interface. And I think in some ways, Susan will talk about this later, but the greatest acceleration has happened between technology developments, COVID-19. Disruption has been quite dramatic in recent months. And I think this collaborative approach is very much needed at the current time. So without maybe any further delay, I would like to formally welcome Susan Hayes Culleton, the Positive Economist. Susan, many of you will know before today, and I know Susan has been actively involved in different professional bodies in Northern Ireland, particularly the IOD and Women in Business, and she is very much a well-known spokesperson on a range of issues. So I know this is a very popular lady this afternoon. But in some ways, Susan demonstrates a lot of the underlying themes around future of work. She is passionate about learning and development. I've known Susan for quite some time, and it never fails to amaze me, her passion for learning. But it's always within this entrepreneurial mindset, which is opportunity focused. So to look at maybe Susan in terms of her background very briefly. Susan is an entrepreneur. She is managing director of the Hayes Culleton Group with clients in Europe and the US. She is also an educator, and a very powerful educator. She is author of Positive Economics, the key text for the Economics Leaving Cert in Ireland. She is also, I'm pleased to say, an associate lecturer for the Business School at Ulster. Susan works with us on several partnership programs with Irish Times Training in Dublin. She also has developed a very successful Savvy Teen Academy in Ireland, looking at teenage work experience amongst the corporates. But lastly, and maybe most importantly, Susan is a fabulous communicator. Her work in terms of her Savvy guides and podcasts are well known. And recently, she also has launched a US show for females in investing. And we're going to hear more of those communication skills later. At the same time, she serves on various boards. She's on the Irish International Business Network, the Ireland-Hong Kong Business Forum. She is also a chartered financial analyst. She holds a BSc in Financial Maths and Economics. And of course, she is a graduate from the MSc in Executive Leadership at Ulster University. So at a time of dramatic change, and I think we all can certainly support that, a positive viewpoint and that entrepreneurial mindset is very important, and it's very welcomed at this time. Now, I'm sure as the talk and the webinar this afternoon progresses, you will have questions, I'm sure you will. Could I ask everyone to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen? If you have questions, we will aim to monitor those that we can select some of the key questions towards the end of Susan's talk. So without any further delay, I have great pleasure to introduce and hand you over to Susan Hayes Culleton.
Gillian, thank you so much indeed for that lovely and warm introduction that I know has come from your research, and I really do appreciate that. It truly is my pleasure to be here today. It's a topic that is hugely influential today, which is the future of the world of work. But what I really like is that you've chosen to look at leadership in the context of that. So I just want to let people know I am going to refer to a range of resources right throughout. I'm going to do that. And we will also promise that anything that I do reference, that we will send you out in an email afterwards also. So therefore you can see exactly how, or you can have access to anything that I am referring to, and that we'll make sure that you don't have to be jotting anything down furiously. I'll be taking a note here. And of course, anything particularly that I mention during the questions and answers, similarly as well, I'll make sure that you get a link to them. So I could, for sure, speak today about all of the various thinking from McKinsey and from Gartner and from all of these bodies, and I will reference many of them, but actually you could go and you could look at all of that yourself. What I want to do here today is that I want to tell you what's going on from my perspective, and the interactions that I have with various different stakeholders right around the world and across the demographic spectrum. So with that, there's 5 key areas that I'm going to talk to you about today. Number 1 is Generation Z. And as they're now coming into the workforce, many millennials have now moved on into management, and they're truly immersed in the workplace now. So the next thing to talk about is Gen Z, and I'm going to talk to you about some insights I have there. The second is I'm going to look at the future of the world of workplace. So a lot of people are talking about, well, what is it going to be like in the future and when things get back to normal? I don't really like that term, and I'll explain why. But I'm going to talk about that as well. The third thing that I'm going to speak about is often something that people refer to as a deficit. And it's a deficit in terms of people's own leadership style, but also often in the workplace itself. But yet, these past couple of months has pushed us very hard to build it, and that is resilience. So we built our own resilience model in our company a number of years ago, and I want to share some elements of that so that maybe that might be of use to you in your own leadership style, but also recognizing when the people that are in your organization, maybe when they don't have a lot of resilience or they're exhibiting factors like that are worrying you, just how you can help them along too. Number 4 that I want to talk to you about is alternative technologies. Technology, even where we are today, we had planned for this event to take place in April, where I would have been speaking to you all in person. And, you know, I was just looking there as some of the chats came in. Some of you are joining us from Adelaide today. Some of you are joining us from Kuala Lumpur. Some of you from Cork. Some of you from Malta. Some of you from Dublin. Some of you from Belfast. That physically would have been impossible before. So I'm going to talk to you about my take on technology, the mistakes I sometimes see, and also, on the other hand, the technologies that we're personally building and why. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about is collaboration. Gillian mentioned there, this event is across 2 different entities within Ulster University. And I'm just going to talk to you about, again, my take on collaboration, who we're collaborating with, and what that means in terms of leading an organization that has very blurry boundaries. So they're going to be the 5 areas that I would like to give to you, and that where you would take them away. And absolutely, as Gillian said, please put in your questions for sure, and we're more than happy to answer them. And also, if any of you want to connect with me directly afterwards, I'm simply just look for my name on LinkedIn and you'll find me there. So let's start at the start. Let's talk about Gen Z. Okay, so Gen Z is Generation Z, and I've had a unique insight into these people because, as Gillian mentioned, I started Savvy Teen Academy, which was a summer camp focusing on careers, communication, confidence, and has now migrated into offering work experiences for teenagers for companies. So I get to meet with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of teenagers every year, and have done for the past 6. And let me tell you a couple of things about them. Number 1, they are very willing to work. They really want to work. But you know what they really want is they want to work and have an impact. And millennials were like this for sure. However, Gen Z are even more so like this because they're the most empowered part of our demographic today. They are people who are willing to march for the environment. They're people who know that influencers can have a huge influence on whether it's consumer decisions or whether it is the impact that one can have on the packaging of an environmentally friendly product. They're highly aware of social issues. They're quite well versed in political issues. Now, when I say well versed, I mean for their age. But the point is that they're very, very empowered. They know they have a voice, and they know collectively that they have a voice. They're also far more inclusive by nature than many that have come before them. So a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives that are running in the workplace today, by the time they're managers, that will seem quite bizarre, because they'll be wondering why we needed to be diverse or inclusive at all, why this wasn't the status quo. And all of that is very positive. They are in some cases underconfident. That can sometimes come with age. By the time they get into the workplace, they may have lost a bit of that. But certainly they do seek out encouragement. They're very aware of mental health. They're very aware of the language around mental health, and they have far less of a stigma around it than previously before as well. So what does all of this mean for the workplace? Well, when they do come into the workplace, they need, in my opinion, in my experience, they need to be spoken to and considered in terms of impact. And I'll just tell you a brief story about this. One of our own staff, the newest member and youngest member, I remember when we changed her, she was working first part-time when she was in university. She just graduated literally online last week. And I was talking to her about the way in which her position was developing in the company, you know, moving from part-time to full-time, etc. And I said, she's been working with us now part-time for the past year. And I said, what has changed? What has changed? What do you like? You know, how can we shape the role to make sure that it is developing of your skills? But I'm not going to do this in a vacuum. I'm going to develop your role together with you, because I need to know what you want to do, and I know what the business needs, and we'll meld the two together and we'll create it. And she said, Susan, I just love having a greater impact. She said, I was working on smaller projects before. Now I know I'm working on bigger ones. I want to take more of the, not just the workload off your desk, but I want to take the worry from you. I want to be able to do things that make a bigger difference. And I know that is ultimately the way she needs to be led at the moment. Now, that may not always be the case. Things may change. But the point is that all that I have seen in Gen Z over the past 6 years is now coming into the workplace in front of me. And what I will say, it's highly beneficial, highly beneficial to participate in reverse mentoring. And reverse mentoring is where you listen to people who are at a different stage to you. But ordinarily, when we talk about mentoring, we think of a senior person mentoring a junior person. Well, reverse mentoring is the other way around. And this is where people who are at a different stage than you, I'm not necessarily going to say it needs to be, you know, beneath or lateral or whatever, but just at a different stage. And when I'm working with 30 teenagers a week, a lot of the time over the past couple of years, they have absolutely kept me so much at the frontier of what's happening in social media, where pressures are coming from today when you're a 16-year-old, what they are looking for in the workplace, what concerns them about the workplace, the brands that they want. They're not necessarily looking to work for a company that offers them a pension. They want to work for a company that has a great CSR policy that, again, is making an impact aligned with the issues that matter. They have varying views around third level education. They are quite concerned, they're very concerned, in fact, will the robots take their jobs? And a range of other things like that. And I could talk for the entire session today about Gen Z, but what I will say is the reason that I could do that is because I listen to them. And I'm fortunate, I get the opportunity to do that. As Gillian mentioned, I wrote the economics textbook for Leaving Cert in Ireland twice with 2 teachers. And we run webinars with students right around the country every single month. So I really have a very good feedback loop with them. But wherever you can find Gen Z in your life, maybe it's your own kids, maybe it's nieces and nephews, maybe it is cousins, maybe it is speaking in a school, listen to them, genuinely listen to them. I don't have kids myself. But I listen to teenagers all the time because they are the future consumers, managers, workers, leaders, etc. And I genuinely think that there is an awful lot to be said for this generation coming into the workforce. They're not always covered in glory. And that, unfortunately, that is the case. And also we can have a cynical view around them. And I don't think they deserve that. But I think if you're cynical about a new demographic coming into the workplace, question where is that cynicism coming from? And I think, again, this is my own view, but I think some of it may be coming from we have to change leadership style again. We're not 2 seconds used to dealing with millennials and now we have to change again. Well, guess what the demographic before you thought? and this is the point, is that yes, it's requiring a different style of leadership. Millennials needed a lot of conversation, a lot of feedback, needed a lot of direction, and so on like that. Gen Z are quite like that too, but this time they're highly digital, highly empowered, very creative, want to make a difference, and sustainability matters to them. The second thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is the future workplace. I'm hearing, a lot of people say it's going to be some sort of hybrid. I'm not happy enough with that anymore. Of course, it's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be a mix of working from wherever, not necessarily home, but working from wherever, whether that's a coffee shop, whether it's on a Caribbean island, whether it is in a summer house, or whether it's in someone's parents' kitchen, wherever. So I think, yes, it will be a combination. But I think as leaders, we need to go further than that. We need to understand why. Why will it be a hybrid? And actually, what parts of both sides of the hybrid, working from home and working from the office, what's driving either of them? And the reason that we need to know that is we all know that in order to lead staff, we need to know what drives them, what motivates them. We need to be influential and we need to be inspirational. We need to set out a vision. We need to hold them accountable. And we also need to put the structures in place to have both a carrot and a stick in order to progress them and move them forward. So in terms of what drives them, why is it that some people want to work from home and why is it that some people really want to be back in the office? Well, for any of you who don't know me, and like there's hundreds of you on this, so many of you won't, but for any of you that do, you know that I am an extrovert. I love people. I'm hugely curious and I'm very energized by being around others. So I'm probably likely to want to be back in the office. Secondly, I'm also very, very mindful. I'm extremely mindful. I practice mindfulness all the time, and it leads me. I believe it's a tool of high performance, and so I use it all the time, and that's why I love having a second space. I've been back in my office now from the 1st of July. And loving it, loving the space in between home and work. So that's another reason why I might like that. I like putting boundaries between work and life. And I also enjoy my 20-minute commute of listening to the news in the morning on the way. So because of all of that, I am quite likely to like working from home. The other thing is that I love the serendipity of bumping into people. I was in Belfast for the past 48 hours. I'm back in Dublin now, but and I loved the serendipity of potentially bumping into somebody that I haven't met before. On occasion over the past number of months, I've been on site for various clients doing various different things. And I love oh, hi, Gillian, I haven't seen you in a while. What's happening? What's changed? You can serendipitously, appear on somebody's Zoom and bump into them that way. You can through social media, and I have. But I love the serendipity, and I love having my staff in here with me and us brainstorming and various different things like that. And the closest that I could get to that over the past couple of months is having a Zoom call with them, not where we're talking and the focus is on that, but simply where we're working almost in the same office. Obviously we're not, but almost in the same office where Zoom is on. We work together, where I do my work, they do theirs, and then we can call on each other or go into a breakout room if we need to talk or whatever, so that there's some form of collaboration there. So the like of me, who likes serendipity, who likes the collaborative effect of people together, the extrovert, the person who likes the second space, the person who's mindful and wants to distinguish my spaces, I'm very likely to want to work from the office, and I have been demonstrating that. Now, who likes to work from home? Well, lots of introverts will tell you this has been one of the happiest times of their lives, is because they're not drained by people. They're energized by their own space, their own time to recuperate. They're not constantly in an environment where there's people talking. And of course, an open office in particular is an environment where it can be quite draining for an introvert. Secondly, as well, of course, people who have a commute that isn't pleasant, that requires them to be an alarm clock hero that they're getting up at ridiculous hours at and going from there. So we have to be aware of that, as well as that's what's driving it. And of course, people with children, maybe they'll want to be able to work from home so that they can work early in the morning and late in the evening and have more family life in the meantime, working or structuring their day around calls, but also their family, and then working non-call related elements into their day at different stages. So I think we need to move beyond that, it's going to be some sort of a hybrid. Yeah, we know that, but we need to move beyond that. And as leaders, we need to consider, how do we put the structures in place accordingly? Because that's where we do need to be agile, and we do need to be more facilitative of what people want, because now we know that the original concerns people had around working from home, which is to do with productivity and a sense of togetherness, we know we can do that now. We were forced into it in the second week of March. We know we can do it. So it's not about what we can do anymore. It's about what do people want to do and how do we cultivate that environment in the best way. But what I've just described has a lot of knock-on effects. Obviously, we need to be able to manage remote teams. Now, you might say, Susan, that's 6 months old. I know that. However, what we now need to think about is how do we recruit remotely? How do we onboard remotely? And again, those are things that are starting to creep into people's into people's lives now, is that moving directly from, maybe Gillian and I have met many times before, Leanne and I have met many times before, Maureen Fox, Nick Reed, any of the people behind this webinar today, I've met them all or spoken to them all before. And it's very easy then to transfer that relationship online, particularly if you think that it's short term. But what about when you don't know people? What about when you're recruiting and onboarding? We had a virtual intern, 2 virtual interns last year from San Diego. I recruited them in person, but I onboarded them online, and that was much, much harder. Much harder. Because you can't say, you know what, let's go out for lunch and let's have a coffee and have a chat. Can't do that. So how do we build those? And politically as leaders, when we're developing our political capital, you can't get the same body language, the political cues, who's who and what's what. It's different. And so you have to be able to manage in that environment. And the people who are being developed within a leadership pipeline need to be aware of that from the very, very beginning. Also, there is other issues, of course, around cybersecurity. When we are in an office, we can be in a secure environment. But when we are outside the office, this has often been something that is kind of, behind. You're so busy trying to get stuff organized and get the link in. Is everyone on Zoom? And is my laptop working? Is my camera right? Is that fixed? Okay, who's using the Wi-Fi? Make sure there's no noise. And then you think cybersecurity, that's way down the list. That can't be way down the list, because that is a reality of working from outside of the office. And it is something that needs to be concerned about. And one other thing I'm going to mention about this, and that is that I was reading a piece yesterday that I will share the link. It was a piece from the Harvard Business Review all around what the new normal will look like. And I took this statement from it, and I'm going to read this word for word because I think it's important. And that is that there is now a greater role of the employer as a social safety net. And you know what? I read that over and over again as I thought about the consequences of that. And you know what? That's very, very true. And from my own, again, personal experience, we have 2 subcontractors that work for us in Belgium. And also all of our team has been remote for quite some time. So this wasn't necessarily new, but I've had lots of face-to-face time with each of them. But after all of this happened, and when the kids were home from school, and when there was a lot of noise in the house, there wasn't an awful lot of time when I say kids in the house, I'm talking about my staff's kids. Then we're not quite sure what was going to happen economically for everybody in the household. And then there was obviously the concern about elderly parents and the disease itself, and the hype in the media and so on like that. Is that I found that I had a totally new job to do. I never had to manage so much pastoral care, I suppose, to use that as more a term you'd hear in university, but I really had to be there for the staff and to hear how they were getting on. Did they have the infrastructure they needed? Some of them said, look, I need time off. My partner's finding it quite difficult. Somebody else said, could we have a chat about where is the company going financially? Is it, how sustainable is it? I know of lots of people who are losing their jobs. I mean, I don't want to ask, but I do have to ask. And that's the point, is that we do have a greater role now, specifically as a social safety net. Outside of my own experience, I now have been seeing more queries coming into us, for example, where people are asking me, I speak on a variety of topics, including the financial markets, economics and entrepreneurship, as well as resilience, as I'll talk to you about later on. But particularly now I was getting asked to go in and speak to companies on Zoom to talk about financial resilience, is how can people be financially resilient? Or just recently we got a contract from a company who wants us to develop a series of content around helping people to manage their money in the best way, not in a once-off event. They want to give people consistent messaging around this, because they need the organization to be resilient, but the people in it to be more resilient as well. And that's what we're talking about, is actually being there to be that. Again, I want to get the correct term, the social safety net. We also have to be considerate that in the large companies, the very large ones, is that people were often in a scenario where their workplace was not just their workplace, it was a place that they met people, they often met their partner, their romantic lives, often it was a good lead generator in that way. And also, of course, it was their second space. They may, particularly at the early days, may have been living in less than perfect rental accommodation, and the workplace served as a pleasant physical environment to be. And all of that was taken away. Their social life, their working life, potentially their romantic life, all of that was taken away. That's what I mean. As employers, we now have got more of a social safety net to provide. And I think we have to take that role extremely seriously to take care of the people who we are asking to lead. And, you know, I certainly felt that twinge sometimes of where I had to have those conversations with people and be very, you know, understanding and empathetic and so on. And then you kind of find it hard to find the shift into, okay, now let's move on to the work, because of course the company needed, the business had a need as well, which was to people to step up in different ways and step up in different environments. And that type of agile leadership is needed more than ever. And it was always going to be needed. It was always going to be needed. But as so many people are commenting, today we now have a situation where trends that we used to see in the past are now accelerating massively. And that's certainly one of them. The third thing that I said I would talk about is resilience. And I'm just going to give you a couple of elements around our own leadership model. I will include a link to what we've produced, and I'll send it out afterwards with the other resources. But I do just want to mention a couple of things. So we developed a model called Prefer. And it's freely available. Anybody can have it. But we called it Prefer, and there's 6 letters, and within each of the letters we have a certain list of behaviors and theories around it. But I'm going to give you the first one, which is P, and P is for perspective. And I'll tell you why I don't like the term going back to normal is because we're not going back. We're not going back. It takes 21 days to form a habit. That's all. 21 days. Many of us are 21 days and 21 on top of that, and 21 on top of that again into some of our new habits. But particularly the reason I don't like it is that it's a huge resilience drainer, massive resilience drainer if you're waiting for something that may not happen or may not happen the way you want it to be. So the first letter of P, being perspective, is one of the key things and the most powerful things, but also one of the hardest things to do to preserve and build resilience, is to match your expectations more so with reality. And I'll just tell you one story extremely close to my heart on this when I learned this. And that is that I remember when my dad was made unemployed in the last recession. And he was coming up to his late 50s at the time. And I remember being down at home in Cork one time with him and listening to him, at the beginning, right? At the beginning, he was absolutely checking out loads of jobs and ringing in and making applications and all sorts. And he was getting no. And that's not easy to take. But anyway, Dad, he went along with it. But then the second 3 months, his professional qualifications and the certs and various different things like that started to go out of date and, various different things like that. And Dad was a truck driver. So when I say the professional qualifications, I'm talking about health and safety. I'm talking about different things like that. I'm not talking about a master's. And then he started to get questions like, well, why haven't you been in employment for the past 3 months, 4 months, 5 months? But the last three, months 7, 8, and 9, Dad's self-esteem went. That was the difference. And he stopped asking. He stopped applying for jobs. He stopped trying. And why wouldn't he? Because after months of being told no, that starts to get inwards. So anyway, I was at home one day and I listened to him applying for a job on the phone. He was, inquiring for a job on the phone. And here was his opening line. He said, "Hello, my name is Michael. And look, before I ever start, I'm nearly 60. So does that mean that I'm too old?" Right? And anyway, then I heard this. I was in the back seat now. I heard this and I said, "Dad, I'm not sure that that's the best opening line if you're applying for a job." And Dad turned around to me, and I don't blame him. And he said, "It's all right for you. You have youth on your side. There you are above in Dublin, building a business. It's all right for you. It's not so easy on me." And I thought, you know what? He's right. So here's what I did. We were at home later on that night anyway, and he was watching a TV show. And I started asking him a couple of questions. And I was being annoying, right? I was, because he was trying to watch this. And I was asking him questions, but I was doing it to catch him off guard. And I said, tell me a compliment that you got, or tell me this, tell me that. And anyway, I got enough data, and I went down to the sitting room, and I came back up an hour and a half later, and I gave him a sheet of paper, and I asked him to read it. And at the top was CV. Dad had never written a CV before. So anyway, then he read it, and he said, "Who's that about?" And I said, "Dad, it's you." And he said, and this broke my heart, he said, "Suze," that's what he calls me, "Suze, if I'm that good, why am I idle?" And I said, "Dad, you're not idle. You're unemployed. This isn't a description of your identity. It is your employment status." I said, "Part of the reason that you're unemployed is because you're not portraying the version that someone like me sees." So anyway, between me and, well, not me, my CV and my brother Connor, he found a recruitment company online. Dad couldn't believe there was jobs on the internet, and between the two of us, anyway, we got him a job, and off he went. Well, sorry, we didn't get him anything. He got the job himself, but by finding the new channel, which was an online recruitment company, and actually putting together a CV, then he went back in. Mam's sanity was returned, and we all lived happily ever after. But the key point I'm making here is look at Dad's perspective. Dad's reality was very different from what he was portraying. It was draining his resilience, and therefore he was self-creating that reality. So that's why I am so focused all the time on making sure that when I feel my resilience drain, I ask myself, am I seeing my reality for what it's really there, or am I waiting and railing against the machine, waiting for something to happen? Our Savvy Teens business that Gillian mentioned at the beginning, that disappeared in 36 hours. What took 6 years to build took 36 hours to come down. So if I was still waiting to get 30 teenagers into a room, I'm going to be waiting a long time. And I have no idea how long I could wait. Imagine scenario planning for that. Whereas instead what we did was we said, right, this is the situation. What can we do about it? And just a month ago, we ran our first virtual program where we had teenagers who were participating in a fintech program for a company. And here's another thing I want to point out. When it comes to building a resilience, it's so important to ask the right questions. And questions matter. They really matter. And a book that I've several book recommendations to make. And if I don't get to them all during this, I'll have them on the email afterwards. But one of them is The Art of Asking the Right Questions by Caroline Mchenry. It's a woman who runs the HR suite here. Well, she runs it in Dublin and in Kerry. And it's the book all around asking your staff and yourself the right questions as you're managing people. And one of the questions in there is, well, there's a range that I could refer to, but one of the questions is, what would you do if you were me? And it's a great question to ask your staff that, you know, what would you do if you were me? Because you can really crowdsource a range of insights then, rather than feeling that you need to come up with the ideas on your own. So I did that. And I said to the staff, I said, you know, if we were going to run a virtual Savvy Teens, what would we do? How would we do it? And together, we really did pull it together. But I'll tell you where I was going wrong. And this was draining my resilience 100%. This is why I need to practice what I preach, but also read what I preach and practice it thereafter all the time. Is I was asking myself, how do I recreate the environment of having 30 teenagers in the room and the conversations and, you know, the teamwork? And I was asking the wrong question because I couldn't do it. I simply couldn't. If I put people into groups online, and particularly people who didn't know each other and hadn't spoken to people that they didn't know in months, the dynamic simply wasn't there and wasn't being created. But here's what I did, is that I said, how could I create an experience for these teenagers in such a way where I can do and lever what I never had in the room? How could I use, and actually on that note, to give you the answers that I gave, I actually created a video today, and I put it up on LinkedIn video, all around the activities that I did use, but also they're similar ones to ones that I use with our university students, our Ulster University students, because when Gillian rang me that second week in March, and she said, Susan, I think we may need to move the entire rest of your semester online. What can you do? And I had to, of course, reverse engineer. Then I needed to think quickly and I needed to act quickly. Whereas when it came to the teenagers, I had time to prepare. And now that we have our new semester starting, I am so ready to take on lots of active peer learning, a lot of technology and so on like that. So I did create a video as a resource for anybody who's participating today around 5 different active peer learning strategies that I used to completely redesign the experience for the teenagers, for the students, for lots of people participating on our programs, etc. But that was important. I asked myself the wrong question. The question should not be, how do I go back to normal? The question is, how do I create a new normal? I know that drives people nuts, but how do I create a new environment, levering what I never had before? And that's so much more exciting. And it's so much more, that's where you can shape a new reality. That's where you can bring enthusiasm and freshness and creativity. Because when you are trying to work on an old perspective, like my dad was, like even I was, like people who are waiting for things to go back to normal, it will drain your resilience. And it's very hard to be positive, and particularly to compete against people who have got that fresh approach instead. So that's one of the things that I would say around building a resilience, is matching expectations to reality and asking yourself the right question. Now, the fourth thing that I wanted to talk about is alternative technologies. A couple of months ago now, I was asked to speak in a webinar around maintaining competitiveness for companies at the company level. And so I researched this in infinite depth. Well, not infinite, finite depth, but I did do a lot of research into this. And I came across a very interesting idea. The whole idea of low-code automation. And little did I know we were participating in it, but low-code automation is taking existing technologies or using technologies that don't require an awful lot of code to create new things, right? And there's a lot of companies out there, like, you know, there's Google Data Studio. Microsoft have a range of these types of technologies. I could go on, but I want to get specific so that I can give you value for this. So what I would say on this is that if you want to experiment with technology, obviously we're all super Zoomers now. We're all living on Teams and we're all on WhatsApp video and all sorts of everything. So we've become a lot more digitally literate and digitally dexterous as well. But it's also worthwhile thinking about how you can create a technology environment in such a way where you can do so very inexpensively and try things out first. So I want to give you a specific example of something that we did, and I want to tell you how we're going to fund this and where this is going to go, right? So in my journey of we have a peer learning business, and one of the key things in peer learning is, of course, enabling people to learn from each other, but extracting those insights. And the problem with extracting insights, asking people to extract insights, is you can often be asking people to do too many things. I'm asking you to learn from somebody else and to crystallize those thoughts and articulate them, potentially all at the one time. So I thought to myself, well, this is a problem. And I went to an AI seminar, artificial intelligence seminar at Microsoft months and months ago. And through this, I came up with the idea, imagine if we could have a thing listening to the conversation, sitting in the middle of the table, and that would actually extract the insight. So I could get on with having the conversation where I was, you know, exchanging information or insights or whatever, but the thing on the table could do the job of actually extracting the insights. So, so we applied for an innovation partnership feasibility study. And this is available to anybody on the island, any business on the island of Ireland. And I know there's lots of you around the world who are tuning in today. There may be an equivalent in your case, right? So you can apply to Ulster University for this. In our case, we went to DCU, where our office is based, wherever, right? And so what we did was we applied for this. It was a €9,000 grant to look into the feasibility of building an innovation. So we applied for that. And after a bit of time and inquiries and so on, we got it. So we now have a research assistant who is looking into this. She started with us 3 weeks ago. She has it built. I'm not joking. She has it built. Now, it's scrappy and it doesn't have a great user experience, but we know that it works. We know that it works, and we built it based on low-code automation. And now it's quite manual, but it's not the point. It's imperfect, but it works. And it has already revolutionized the way in which I now interact with people. Before I used to be on calls and taking notes. Now I have our tool running in the background. It'll take the notes for me and produce a summary. And interestingly, I've been telling companies about this over the past week, and they say, well, you know, can we use this? Can we license this? And I said, well, we haven't it built yet in such a licensable way, but, and for anybody who wants to talk to us about being a beta tester on that, we are going to be looking for companies to try it out in other places as well, outside of what we do. So again, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to have a separate conversation. But anyway, apart from all of that, the key thing here is that through low-code automation and through applying for this feasibility study and through bringing the research assistant into the business, and that was 100% funded, we are now setting ourselves on a totally different path as a business. We're solving our own problem, which was the peer learning issue that I had identified, but already businesses themselves are now saying to me, I have a different use case for that, Susan. I would actually love to use that when we're having, you know, when we're having lots of intensive conversations between ourselves and we can't all be focusing on taking notes or whatever. I would like, and there was, I could go on and on about the use cases for it, but the point I'm making here is what's really important is thinking low code, that's because that's out there, and look at the companies that are out there. Like, we didn't need to be building voice recognition or machine learning or artificial intelligence. Lots of companies out there have already done that. We're levering that. So think low code and think levering other technologies. But secondly, if you're on the island of Ireland, build a bridge to university. And the Ulster University Business School, I have to say, is one of the most open business schools that I have seen in any university that I've worked with around the world. They really are. They have a business development team who will actively go and be proactive in talking to you. And simply, if you pick up the phone to the Ulster University Business School and say, can I talk to Nicholas Reid or Maureen Fox or whoever the person might be, they're open to having a conversation with you and simply saying, we have an idea, or else turn it around. Say, what can the business school do for me? Is there an opportunity to find an intern? Is there an opportunity to find a graduate? That's the other thing, is the university took care of recruiting. Alice is her name. She's from South Korea. They recruited Alice, who was just after finishing a master's here in DCU. And then she came straight to us. She finished her dissertation the week before she joined with us. So as a result, you can see this is a way in which we pursued innovation, or pursuing the feasibility of it. We recruited somebody and we found the resources within the university in order to do that. 100% funded. Now, of course, the next stage is the innovation partnership. We have been down this road before, thankfully successfully as well. That amount of money is up to €200,000. Some of that has to be funded by the company, but it's certainly hugely, hugely valuable that we have found in the past. And there's lots of other opportunities too. Talk to the university about them, right? Particularly reach out to Ulster University Business School and see what's there. See what's there. But I'm telling you, that has been part of our secret sauce as a business, is engaging with a university and looking at the range of resources that they have through people, technology, ideas, access, you name it. So that's the fourth thing I want to talk about. And I know we're getting short on time, so I'm just going to be very brief in the last one. The last one is about collaboration. And this ties back into the future of the world of work. Well, it's really the present, but it's, again, an accelerated present. But in particular, I wanted to talk about who exactly do we collaborate with? Because already, if you really listened to me, and I know I speak fast, that's why having the AI summarizing what I say can have to be helpful to hear what I said myself. But anyway, already you've heard me talk about my own staff. You've heard me talk about clients. You've heard me talk about reverse mentoring with the teenagers. You've heard me talk about the subcontractors in Belgium. You've heard me talk about collaborating with the university and a research assistant who's come in with us. You've also heard me talk about the LinkedIn video that I did today. So we have also a touch point there in terms of our social media audience. And of course, I could go on. And in my mind, today's leader needs to not just look at who is on their payroll, but far beyond it. Our clients are our sales team. They are the best and most credible referrers, far more so than if I was to hire a sales team directly myself. Of course, they need to be incentivized and managed and understood. So I asked them simply, why did you come to us? What are we doing that you like? What could we do that would be beneficial? How can we thank you? And so therefore I manage them in the same way, well, not the same way, in a different way than I would a sales team, but I take care of them, because they are part of our wider organization. I keep in contact with our university contacts. I go through our social media touch points, and just in the same way that Ulster University is connecting with its alumni today, keep understanding who your wider stakeholders are and managing them as a leader, as an agile leader, and thinking through what can we do, how can we take care of them, how can we progress forward with whatever they're talking about. So in particular, I just want to mention there's 8 key collaborators that I'm constantly thinking about. Our subcontractors, our virtual interns, we had 2 this year from Hong Kong, and we've had 2 this year, 1 from Kansas, 1 more is joining us in a little while. They've spent 6 weeks each with us. Again, I make sure to pour time into them, to listen to what they have to say, participate in the reverse mentoring, give them the experience of managing and delegating within a global team, etc. As I mentioned, our collaboration with the university, collaboration with our suppliers, collaboration with clients, with our referrers, with our social media audience, and one last one that people often overlook, but I don't, because they're so integral to us, and that is the people who are working for our clients. When I go on site, and I'm looking after 30 teenagers in an environment, therefore, I know I'm going to have to work with the catering people that are there, different guest speakers who are there, people who are working in administration there. They're important to us. During that phase, I'm part of their staff, they're part of mine. And again, I have to think, okay, what communication style do I need to have here? What really matters to these people? What irks them? What sort of company cultural things can I discern and observe so that I can, dovetail into that? All of that matters. And by the way, in case you think all of this sounds exhausting, it is exhausting, but that's the beauty of it. That ultimately is the beauty of the excitement of how much we can do today and how many possibilities are there, as long as we're willing to be open-minded and to be considerate of all of the things that we learn as baseline leadership skills. And just before I go back to Gillian, please do, I'm more than happy to take any questions, and as many as we can. I do just want to make the point, one other book recommendation. This is on my reading list in my master's, so it's coming from good authority. The Leadership Pipeline is probably the book that helped me most in understanding how to become a leader across different stages of my career. And the other one is called Star Leadership. Star Leadership is a book that was actually written by two people, father and son McKee in Northern Ireland, and that was the best book on leadership I read for an SME. So I just want to make those two book recommendations. And truly, I wish you all the very, very best in all that you do in managing your workforce into the future. But I hope that you do so with positivity and excitement and opportunity. And certainly, again, if there's anything I could do for any of you, please do pop me a note on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to respond and to do all that I can for you. But between now and then, Gillian, if you want to come back on and put any questions to me, I'm very, very happy to hear them.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan. Gosh, you've covered a lot of ground there. Some great feedback, and I think your comment about the new normal, I think very, very appropriate. A lot there that we certainly want to tease out. Now, we've had quite an interesting questions, and we've tried to group these into sort of key themes, okay? So the first question we have, and I think this came from Mark Allen, is around how you yourself build up your resilience as a leader. Okay, I know you've touched on some of the professional models, but personally, you yourself, any advice on that?
I suppose the simplest things are best here, Gillian. And I think probably the greatest secret that any of us has is simply taking care of ourselves. The R, by the way, in prefer is recharge. So of the 6 letters that I mentioned, R is recharge. And what I think it's so important, and I'm really sorry to bring this up, but particularly for women, because I find women often can delegate themselves to the bottom of the pile. And I know men don't not, but particularly I would say this to women, and the woman that has shown me this most is my own mother, is that you so need to take care of yourself. It's not selfish to take care of yourself, it's selfless. And I believe, Gillian, like as I'm looking at the list of people here, there's people here who are, you know, fathers and mothers and sons and daughters and their colleagues and their bosses and leaders and managers and visionaries and all sorts. If you don't take care of the foundation, how do you expect the rest of the building to stand up tall? So personally, I do, and I have become better at it. I wasn't great, but I've become better at, you know, separating work and life. And that's why, again, the second space of coming in here on a daily basis really matters to me. It really does. I have become better at bringing exercise and into my life. That's, by the way, that's the E, P-R-E-F-E-R. E is for exercise, the first E is incorporating exercise. And I use exercise, Gillian, not just to strengthen my body. It does that anyway. I do it to strengthen my mind. The 4 best places that you get your ideas are: number 1, when you're on holidays. Number 2 is in the shower. Number 3 is just before you go to sleep and just before you wake up. And number 4 is when you're exercising. And that is because you're away from your existing environment. So I do that. And the third thing is actually the most potent, is that I don't feel guilty about taking care of myself. I don't feel guilty at all. I don't feel guilty about if it's going for a massage, if it's reading a book, if it's going for a walk, if it's spending a weekend at home with mum and dad. I think that powers up my rechargeability and thus my resilience.
Okay, some great advice there. Follow-on question was, what's your advice on, this came from Darrell Cummings, what to leave behind as a leader going forward? Is there anything that leaders can leave behind at the moment?
Yes, I think for a start, I said letting go of waiting for life to go back to normal is one, and I know I've dealt with that, and you know why. The second thing I think is that it's important to leave behind the idea that everybody will be visible in front of you as your team. You know, it's interesting when we talk about body language, like all you can see is this bit of me. Everything else, all of the other cues that one might read, you can't see them. But if you have, and you know, I love when Zoom comes on and you can see everyone like the Brady Bunch up in front of you. But even at that, you won't be able to visibly see everybody all the time. And I think that there's a couple of connotations around that. Number one is that we have to be able to draw that out more is, let's say, inviting people to turn on their cameras, or having more time around that one-to-one, or just giving people time to be seen. But secondly, I would say is that your own visibility matters. We used to have a team meeting once a year where I'd bring all the staff together. Then we started having one about once a month. I've changed that now to where it's once every 2 weeks. And instead of me talking about what's going on in the company, I let the staff say, here's what I've been doing. And I remember doing that the first time, Gillian, and I had nothing left to say at the end because they covered it all. And I was thinking, why should I have the franchise of explaining what's going on in the business when ultimately they're the architects of it? I'm the visionary and the director. But at the end of the day, they're the people who are making it happen. Give them the visibility to say, well, I've been working this and this and this. And instead now, so I've realized that everything operationally, now they're all going to talk about, and I bring in the new stuff, or, you know, talk about the things that might be worrying them, or I'll talk about future direction or new developments. So visibility matters. We need to forget about the idea that visibility only happens when people are sitting in front of you. That has to change. And there's a lot of follow-on thoughts around that as well that one could consider. The third thing I think we have to forget about is thinking that, like, you know, it's so difficult when you research an area like this, and as I was doing in preparing for today, so much of what was written before February is out of date, so much of it. And so I think we have to let go of old ideas, old assumptions that we held to be true. And whatever they might be. And a great way to reveal your assumptions is another tool that I learned during my master's, is as a team. And when I say a team, I could mean you and your suppliers, you and customers, you and a peer group, you and your manager. I don't just mean you and the people you work with every day. Is to document what you all assume. Document what you all assume, and then you'll hear what other people are assuming. And then when you document all of those, put them on a matrix of likelihood and impact. So what if what we're assuming changed? What would happen? Is it highly likely that might happen? And secondly, what would be the impact of that? And when you map that into a matrix, then that can be hugely powerful, and that will absolutely tell you what you need to leave behind.
Okay, very good. Now, again, a couple of quick questions for you, Susan. We have one from Sarah Smith. What is your measure for Gen Z in terms of the exact generational divide there?
So a millennial is somebody who came of age during the millennium. So that is somebody who anywhere where somebody's date of birth is 2000. So from 2000, and then that dates back as far as 1985. So 1985 to 2000, Gen Z would be next. So, and I know, by the way, Sarah, and thank you for asking that, I know people have varying different definitions of this. So for me, it is those people whose date of birth would be 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And so the 15-year-old today was born in 2005. So I would say that my interactions with Gen Z, or Gen Z starts to interact really with when I started running Savvy Teens, which was 6 years ago. That's when Gen Z started to be just about coming into that kind of O-level junior cert transitionary area onwards. That's my age measure.
Okay. One final question was, any thoughts around leadership approaches for those who have less flexibility to work at home, depending on their job? So if their role does not offer them the flexibility of maybe remote working, any thoughts around leadership going forward?
I do think an awful lot of people will absolutely opt for those types of roles. I'm one of them. You know, I'm one of them where, despite the fact that I may have the flexibility, I lasted 3 weeks working from home when we started the business 10 years ago, and I'm still that way. So I think that in terms of leading those people, first of all, don't assume that necessarily that there are going to be people who won't want to come into the office. I think there will be plenty, and for the reasons that I said, they're probably going to have the characteristics that I shared earlier, and more. So what I would say there is that I think in many ways traditional forms of leadership matter there, but particularly when it comes to HR and having those one-to-ones, when it does come to having people in certain parts of the office or on a factory floor or whatever type of environment that there are, I think if we can take the best of why working from home works in terms of the collaboration of people working maybe together remotely, is that how do we recreate that in a room, and again levering what you have online back into the room again. So maybe that is where everybody actually has a device in front of them so that they can have a collective whiteboard where it's not just one person taking notes, or various different things like that. Is actually, if you're going to have a form of leadership that is going to be exclusively focusing on the in-person environment, I can't even believe that this is a thing that we're talking about, but if we are, I think that it still is beneficial to look at what techniques that somebody who's managing a global or a remote team might have. But in particular, the one term that comes to me most of all is the ambidextrous leader, is the person who needs to have growth and as well as stability, where they need to think about how do we make things strong and secure and routine and status quo, but at the same time we need to stimulate growth and innovative thinking. So I would say reading around the area of the ambidextrous leader and weaving that into what might seem almost a one-dimensional form of working now might be helpful.
Okay, okay, thank you, Susan. I'm conscious maybe time-wise we'll have to save some of these until later. On behalf of the business school, certainly we want to thank you, Susan. I'm also going to hand over to Eddie from the Alumni. But again, as Susan has said, if anyone would like to engage with the business school, please feel free to contact us on the engage@ulster.ac.uk email. Thanks for me, so I'll hand you over to Eddie.
Thanks very much, Gillian. And I'd like to join all the people that are passing on their thanks on the chat bar, Susan, to you for your wonderfully inspiring presentation. I think one of the letters that you mentioned, the letter E, a couple of times, and I think you could add enthusiasm and energy to that for it. It was wonderful, and thanks very much for doing that. As a university, we take great pride in the achievements of our graduates, and you've been really successful, and we're delighted that you have stayed in touch. Again, it was something that you mentioned in your presentation, and you practice what you preach. You have stayed in touch and you have given back, and that's something that we're delighted to benefit from. And I think everybody on the conversation today benefited from your expertise. So thanks very much for that, and I know you continue to speak and teach at the university as well, and that's very much appreciated too. We have more than 200,000 alumni, and with friends that haven't graduated through the university but engaged with the university in many ways. And I think now more than ever, we're starting to realise the importance of those relationships and those networks. And that's something we would encourage the people who are on the call today to stay in touch. That's something we want to do. And Gillian, you've given the engage@ulster.ac.uk address if people want to get in touch. And I know that there will be an email that will follow, and we'll make sure that where alumni want to update their details, we'll include a link in that to make sure that people can stay in touch and receive the messages that we send out. Gillian, I know we were speaking briefly beforehand, and you were talking about getting information today. I think it was from the Dean of the Business Faculty in Glasgow, and he talked about the fact that the network and the alumni network was going to become increasingly important. So that's something we want to support you. And as Susan said, our clients are our sales team. And so the university is not made up of current students and current staff. It is made up of all the people that engage with the university or who have passed through it. And we want you to help the university become a better place. So we'd like to stay in touch and just keep in touch with each other. I think, again, Susan, you said that it's important to take care of yourself. And that's something, I think that's a message we all have to get out. We have to get out to our teams. So just to finish off, I would like to thank Susan again. I'd like to thank Gillian and her colleagues in the business school, Nick, Leanne, Maureen as well, who are helping organise the event, and Roisin, who works along with me in the alumni relations team. I'd like to thank her, and particularly like to thank all the people who joined today, and hopefully we'll continue to stay in touch, and we'll talk to you again on a similar forum soon. So thank you. Thanks very much.